Last call. My name is Derek Melinda, welcoming you to the new year, 2024. Our first stream of the new year. Feels like we've been gone for a long time, but of course, we streamed 5 days last week, so it hasn't been that long. Sorry for the late posting of this if you're watching live. I kind of forgot today was Tuesday, the whole New Year's, and I thought I was supposed to go back to work today, but turns out we had off today, so it was a very confusing day. I got confused. I thought it was Wednesday. So long story short, I kind of forgot that we had a stream tonight. So I quickly threw something out to my patrons and said, hey, throw some ideas at me. Normally we do a poll. It's a little bit more measured. I have a little bit more time to get my ducks in a row and get prepared. But that is not the case tonight. So we're going to be kind of winging it more perhaps than we usually do. So feel free to view this less as a lecture, right, and more of a conversation, more of a workshop, perhaps, because ultimately I want to understand. Some of my members asked for this, and we didn't really get into the detail of it, but I mean, some of it I guess comes down to what does campaign management mean to you, and what are some of the challenges within that space that you find that you are experiencing, and maybe together with this amazing, awesome chat and community, we can solve some issues and we can come up with some good takeaways. Ultimately, while I have sort of a heuristic that I use to manage campaigns, and it varies from system to system, and it varies from the type of campaign, even within a system. The way I manage and run, say, a mega dungeon-based dungeon crawler in a D20 based game is going to be very different than the way I manage a adventure path based game in a D20 based game. So, there's a lot of subtleties and nuances between these, but ultimately my goal, hopefully, is that between your questions, your, areas that you think you would need help with, and sort of my process of going through my heuristics, we can come up with a kind of maybe a checklist of sorts by the end of tonight's stream. So that is sort of the goal, welcoming everybody here to a happy and wonderful new year. Let me get some shout outs here. We've got Ben, who's in here for the top of the evening, a little bit of time before he plays his WEG Star Wars game. Ben was one of the people who was interested in this topic. So part of me is like, oh, what does Ben think of our campaign? And if you're interested in some of the advice from Ben, the GOAT himself, you can go ahead and check out our last stream, which was all about NPCs. Mark says, I need to work on my titles. What's wrong with my title? It's RPG taxes. You don't think that's going to bring people in? Good. Griffin Helix says, this song is addicting, very hard to start listening to. Yeah, a lot of people really dig the music. It's funny, real quick side. Do you know why that is our theme song? Because when we first did these live streams, I used to just put on I have a subscription to Epidemic Sound, which is a copyright-free, DRM-free music that I can use and display on my stream and not get copyright struck for. And it's like $15 a month or something, which obviously is a lot compared to something like Spotify. But if you put something on Spotify on your stream, you'll get copyright struck. So our streams, I used to put this playlist on. It was this kind of lo-fi, chill vibes beat. And our streams used to be pretty consistently right around exactly 2 hours. And as a result, for whatever reason, at the 2-hour mark was this song. And when it would start to play, it always ended up being that it was right around the time we would wrap up. And so this song kind of became the unofficial outro music. And then, eventually people were like, that song's so great. And I liked it a lot. So that's how we ended up coming about to this. Happy to see Frostjack here as well. Sidon is in the house. Hello, Sidon. Oh, good, Frostjack. You got that sorted out. Wonderful, wonderful. Compy has been going through our class discussion videos. Great. Compy, I assume you mean the ones that are like the deep dive on the historical context of where the class came from all the way up through to 5th edition D&D and Pathfinder 2nd edition. Those are a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing those streams. I don't want to say it's a flex, but it's a great opportunity for someone like me who has what I consider to be a fairly good institutional knowledge of these game systems throughout the many years, even though I wasn't playing in the 1970s. I wasn't born in the 1970s. As a sort of student of D&D history, it's an opportunity for me to finally get to use that for something for usefulness. My good buddy Rich is in the chat. Hey, buddy, hope you're having a great New Year, bud. I need to see you. We should hang out soon. I miss you. We should see each other. Jackal. Hello, Jackal. What's up? Just got finished with some sweet PBX games. Only 2 characters bit the dust today. Yes, the good old Path Builder Extreme, which is sort of the current craze that is sweep. Northern Reaches, our mega campaign, has closed for the year. We'll be opening up season 3 here in a few months. But in the meantime, the people who can't get enough Pathfinder 2 on our Discord have been sort of upping the ante and playing a sort of a tongue-in-cheek game that they call Path Builder Extreme, where they just make the most like insane builds, not necessarily car op, but just to really try really out there builds and then see how they play in, kind of these gauntlet type scenarios. I think it's really funny. I think it's really cool. Kyle, hello. Happy New Year to you as well. Great to see you. John B is in the house. Howdy, John. Glad to see you. Ken is here. Donnie himself is here. Hello, hello. Gonza in the chat. Hello, Gonza. Let's see here. Let's see. Mikey, the goat. Your cat is the goat, though. Probably. And you know what? Your avatar suggests this. Let's see. What is this? Great question. Nobody knows. TTRPG taxes main form is the 10WD20. Oh, that is fantastic. Howdy to Roman. Panic asks, are you familiar with the Zeitgeist AP by Ian World? I am not. RPG taxes sounds like something I might actually want to do. Good morning, Kragan. And hello and happy New Year to you, Zerverus. So, welcome everybody. So tonight's topic is a little bit esoteric and a little bit philosophical. As again, I've kind of forgot about the stream, so I didn't have as much time to sort of put my thoughts together and prepare for this as I might usually do. So, bear with me. And as a result, I didn't really have any good ideas to put any thing for tips. So all I can say is, if you're enjoying the stream and you want to support us, feel free to drop us a super chat or feel free to drop us a Stream Elements tip. There's a link for that in the description below, or you can type !tip in chat, and that'll give you a link to our Stream Elements page. It's a couple extra steps, but we get a higher percentage of it. But that's why we have 2 different ways that you can support us if that's what you want to do. And of course, if you want to be a part of these conversations, part of these votes, if you want to talk about RPGs 24/7, more or less, and play a bunch of new RPGs, then you're going to want to check out the Night's Last Call Patreon, because that is where you get access to not only exclusive videos and extra bonus content and special live streams, but you also get access to, it's the only way to get access to our Knights of Last Call Discord, where, that's where the magic happens. Happy to get the trombone noise. I'll take it. Esoteric and philosophical is on brand for this channel. Yes, and you know what? I do what it says on the tin, John. That is what I am aiming to do. Heavy Metal Mystic, good afternoon or good evening, as it is for me, to you as well. Okay, so as I said before, some of this comes down to what your issues are, what your comments are, what your questions are, and what does campaign management, what does that mean to you? And I kind of have my idea of what it means to me, but ultimately, I think we'll just kind of walk through this process together. Ayo.
Omnisitoad tipped $10. Looking forward to a whole new year of RPG goodness.
That is awesome. Thank you, Omnisitoad. Appreciate that. Appreciate the support for the new year. Again, we're trying to still figure out exactly what we're going to be covering and doing this year. Obviously, last year we did a lot of different stuff. We had our Root actual play, and we had class streams. We did rankings, tier rankings, Pathfinder 2 stuff, a ton of stuff for first looks and new games and stuff on Forge in the Dark and Powered by the Apocalypse. But we're in a really weird time right now. Things are really, really changing. And there's a lot of new RPGs, a lot of maybe new blood coming into the sort of outside of the D&D sphere. So, I don't know where the tides are heading. Pathfinder 2nd Edition just came out with the core release, but Core 2 doesn't come out till Gen Con. And I don't know that there's like a ton of new content coming out before that. So there's kind of a hurry up and wait and see with Pathfinder 2. So yeah, I think it'll be an interesting year. I'm really, really looking forward to it. We got a super chat for more super chats. You know what? Technically that is what the super chat goal is. It is a super chat for more super chats. Yes. Say Versus. Thank you so much for that. Kefka approves. Really, really appreciate it. Oh gosh. John says, can I just say that I love how the FF7 member joined thing stuck around since the FU stream, even if Final Fantasy 7 is overrated and Final Fantasy 9 is better. John, number one, I love Final Fantasy. We've been talking about Fabula Ultima, it seems, for a ton. And, you're right. It kind of just stuck and it kind of became our thing. But I will say that when Final Fantasy 7 came out, I thought this is the best Final Fantasy of all time. When Final Fantasy 8 came out, I didn't like it as much as 7. And when 9 came out at first, I was disappointed. But after playing 10 and after starting 12, I have come back since to believe that Final Fantasy 9 is, in my personal opinion, better than 7 in the sense that it is more a style and aesthetic that I enjoy. So, all right. So, Final Fantasy 14 is the best. I'm trying to remember. That's the online one. Yeah. I have not played that one. Is that the one that was so bad that they had to relaunch it? But then apparently it was the shit. So good for them, I guess. They fixed some of their key issues. Rick is here. So Rick is the person who originally asked for this. So, I think I'll put Rick in the hot seat a little bit here. Rick, you asked about campaign management, and I want to know what kind of questions do you have, or what does campaign management mean to you, and what do you want to sort of discuss related to that? Because again, that was Rick, that was you're the one who proffered that suggestion. So I'm going to put you on the spot and say, what are some of the questions that you have, or what are some of the kind of issues maybe that you're having? Maybe you don't have any. Let me go over to our favorite, yours and mine, favorite whiteboard. Let's talk about this. So, there's a lot of conversation around about what does it mean, to manage a campaign, right? And I think what it really comes down to is, and again, in my mind, there's sort of different, quadrants or different areas that we could talk about. So on one hand, right, you have these, what I will call player management. Okay. So what do I mean by player management? I simply mean that I think part of the care and upkeep and taking care of a campaign as a game master is you do have to manage your players a little bit. There is some administrative work that comes with managing your players. Now, this kind of gets divided into sort of out of game and in game stuff. Okay. Which is to say, out of game stuff is stuff like, schedules and managing, schedules or logistics of who can be when, where, right? I mean, unfortunately, this is stuff that you really need to manage as a game master. But in game, snacks, food, right? Drinks, the whole 9 yards. And if you have a player who can step in and handle, help handle some of this for you, it's a godsend. So, as an example, Smith is always really good about hosting and providing food and drink, and it's on the way before we even get there. He makes sure he asks us before the session, hey, who wants to be eating tonight? So it's very, very good. And that's nice because then when I'm running the game, it's one less thing that I need to think about. But there's also the idea of managing the players in game, right? Which is, what are the expectations of a player? Managing their expectations. What are they positive about? What are they enjoying in the campaign? What are they not enjoying in the campaign? A campaign is a living, breathing thing. And, the care and feeding of this campaign will go a long way towards determining how good your campaign is. And a big part of that is the players. If you want, it's sort of a kind of a paradoxical thing, but, a lot of GMs, in my experience, tend to, wish or want, maybe there's some hyper-focused, hyper-controlling GMs out there who don't want this, but most GMs that I have met or I've talked to here on this channel have expressed a desire that their players be more engaged, right? That their players get more proactive. Well, as paradoxical as it may seem, a big part or a big key to a player being more proactive is you, the GM, need to be more proactive. And I think a lot of this comes down to those expectation settings. And what I mean specifically too by that is like we are used to, we talk all the time about this, like, the session 0, right? And, that's where you hash everything out and everything's, great. And we go from there. But the truth of the matter is a campaign that is evolving and changing is going to also create new expectations out of your players, and things that they thought they might be enjoying at session 0 may no longer be true 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 sessions in. And as a GM, if you can focus on what your players are engaged with and what your players are interested in, then you are creating perhaps the best chance that they are going to want to take that next step and, take that leap into player activity or player engagement, because you have done the groundwork. You have prepared a campaign. And by the way, you don't have to be subtle about this or coy. I understand that there's a lot of people who want, the campaign to be like this unknowable entity. But I think having a conversation with a player, maybe privately, outside of the game, is maybe a great time to do it. Or you could very candidly sit down and, again, as part of your out-of-game management session, say, "Hey, everybody, we're gonna start 15 minutes late today because we're gonna take the first 15 minutes just to quickly kind of talk about the state of the campaign and where everybody is at and what we're thinking and what we're feeling." And so coming back to that, understanding how your different players, what they want and what they need out of a game. Now, I should note that this could be challenging, right? Because, you might have player A who, they're like, I want more challenging combats and I want to get cooler magical items. Okay. And then player B is like, I want to role play with NPCs more. And I also, I want a romance plot line for my game. Part of the trick or the key or the challenge of being a game master is figuring out how to take these disparate player needs and wants and combine them with your own ideas about how a game should be and create something, hopefully, that everybody can be enjoyed. Because the other thing too is, you should aim to give the players some of what they want, not all of what they want. That should be off the table. If a player wants 5 things out of their campaign, that's great. You should strive to try to get them at least a couple things off their list. But you should not necessarily feel compelled that you need to deliver everything on it, because number one, that is just probably not possible. But number two, part of the fun of a campaign is the surprise element, is the unknown element. Even as the game master, need to sort of leave room for going in a direction the story doesn't, necessarily point to today. I was talking in the Discord recently about our root actual play, which was only 6 or 7 sessions, but how every time I, as the game master, felt like I kind of had the story on a certain trajectory, which isn't to say I was trying to steer it. It was just like, okay, we're building up momentum in this storyline. I think I can see where this is heading. As soon as that would happen, Bob or Aaron would come in and just drop a bombshell and just do a complete 180 and just take that train right off the rails, and take just all the wheels off the bus. And suddenly the campaign is now hurtling in a new direction. Now, the standard GM reaction, right, is to grab the wheel and try to jerk it back onto the road. But with practice and experience comes this idea of just, going with the flow and sort of coming into that respect. Let me see here. Rick finally got back to us. Delta between running solo adventures versus what type of things do you need to manage for a 12 to 20 story arc? One concern is how to keep the players focused on the main quest, perhaps usage of NPCs. Okay. So yeah, we'll get to that when we talk about the actual meat of the game management, for sure. Because you're absolutely right. That could be a challenge. So let's see here. Donnie says you will have many session zeros in the long run campaigns. Yes, you should constantly be revisiting that. Flint, evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a minute. Hey, Flint, great to see you. Awesome, great to see you. Let's see. One of the best things my GM has done in our long running 5e campaigns is doing occasional roundtables to discuss exactly this. Now, we have discussed, we've discussed this before on this channel, but I will take this opportunity again to really, in terms of player management and in terms of understanding where your group is at, I cannot stress this enough. I really think the power of the survey cannot be understated. And I think that, this is something that, I have seen Aaron use for many years to great success. And I personally think you should do it each session. I don't think that is asking too much. You could ask them to do it. There's some value. You could either have them do it right after the session, right? And the problem or the advantage of having them doing it right after the session is everything is fresh. At the same time, they may not be able to fully process everything that they want. They may not have the time or the sort of mental capacity to quickly get you the information that you need. So I think it's also fine to say, hey, drop me an email or a message. Maybe if you could do that in the next day or two, that would be amazing. Now, obviously, if somebody doesn't get to it, it's no big deal. I don't even think you should really feel like you should have to, encourage players to fill out these surveys. I think you should tell them this is kind of a mandatory thing. And if they don't do it, it's not a bad thing. But typically what I recommend doing is the way that sort of I've seen it done, which is a great effect, is ask the player straight up about this session. What was something you really liked about this session? And you may be surprised to see what kind of answers you get, because especially if you have players who aren't as vocal, there may be some small, tiny moments that completely missed, your awareness. And somebody comes in and says, I really love that moment where, where the blacksmith or the barkeep remembered us and gave us drinks for free. And it's like, wow, okay, wow. That was a moment that stuck out to you. That's good information. That is a better way for me to know what it is that you're expecting. But I really think focusing on the positive is a great thing. But I also think as a GM, you should say, what scene or encounter was your least favorite? And I should add, and assume at the end of all of these is, and why? And why? Now, the way that this question is phrased, I think is important. Because if you say, what scene did you hate? Or what scene did you not like? A player might say, none. They were all good. They were all fine. But by phrasing it this way, what scene was your least favorite? Almost by definition, one of the scenes or one of the encounters will be their least favorite. Even if they enjoyed them all and had fun, it's still, I think, more useful for you to get actual feedback instead of like nothing. In fact, if a player is routinely saying that nothing that you're doing is either enjoyable or, not enjoyable, I think you have a bigger problem on your hand, which is that you have a player who's more or less not engaged with your campaign in any sort of meaningful way, which could be a separate issue. But this, I think, is important, again, to learn how to get feedback about what are the things that you could do better. And, sometimes it could be something with the game. Sometimes it could be something with the way that another player or maybe you as the game master, ran in. So I think that this is very, very useful. And then the last one is, what elements or ideas would you like to see in the campaign going forward? So this is just a great way of asking your players, what are you excited about? What do you want to deal with? We got Ben coming in with $10. Thank Ben.
Ben tip $10. When you are running a pre-printed campaign, like Rick is, I would focus on making sure that the NPCs reinforce the main arc of the campaign instead of leading to tangents. You can still focus on character studies, however. Give them interesting dilemmas.
So that's great advice, Ben. And I think you basically definitely are mirroring what I'm going to say when we start talking about game structure, because I think managing games, we're talking about players right now, right? When you're talking about managing games, it really is kind of a different, there's two worlds, maybe three worlds, but the one world is you are playing a pre-published adventure or adventure path or adventure campaign that has a sort of expected character arc. That's one form of management. Another form of management is the fairly open world. Players can kind of do whatever they want. There is no preset story arc goal. There's no adventure path or anything like that the characters are part of. And I say three because the third element could be sort of your prepless games, which I still think you need to manage. I think you just manage them in a different way. So there's sort of the game, there's the prep game and the non-prep game. And then for the prep game, there's the adventure path game. And then there's sort of the sandbox or non-adventure path game. So I think that there's a lot to be said there. So again, I personally feel like you should do this each session, but if it's been, particularly if you're playing bi-weekly or monthly, you want that feedback. That being said, if you're playing every week, you could potentially do this, every other session but I don't think that having this is a real too much of an ask for a lot of players. I mean, you're doing all the work of running this game and making an entertaining evening or whatever for your friends or for your players. So I think the least that they could do is spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and put together some thoughts for you as a game master. Because again, this is like your performance evaluation. This is how you understand what's going on, and getting that feedback, And I think as a game master, you should be much more open to feedback. So I think that's kind of where I would go with that. So yeah, let's see. Panic says Paizo APs usually tend to 3 to 6 books with maybe 2 to 3 NPCs per chapter. I'd be curious how you suggest management of an AP that has a super long duration with hundreds of NPCs. Well, we can talk to that. Long running campaign pivot example. PC stole an airship but can't actually use it because they don't use magic. Throughout my campaign plans when they suggested the airship goes all TARDIS. Yes, sir. Right. At the end of the day, if you want the players, look, if you and the players are completely aligned, great. But at the end of the day, the players should be the ones, that are sort of leading the charge. And what the players want to do, your two options are go with the flow or throw roadblocks in their way. And if you're constantly throwing roadblocks in their way because you want them to go in a different direction, then you have a gross miscommunication of expectations, but also it's going to make the game feel very contentious, and it's going to make the game feel like you are ice skating uphill, because you're always going to be working against the players instead of working with the players. Let's see. Gonza says you could also incorporate something like roses and thorns. So it's a much more poetic way of saying that. Stars and wishes. Okay. Let's see here. For session check-ins, I think conversations are a better way to ask. It's closer to an emotional response than a thought out or manipulated answer. It gets you closer to the root of what players are. Now, Eloy, I agree with you, except there's one thing I think, which is this is nice for data. Maybe this is the analytical side of me, but this is conversations. I mean, unless you're pulling out a recorder, when I'm talking and there's a lot of different ideas and other people are chiming in, it's very easy to lose track of that data element. If you ask people to actually write down what it is that they enjoyed or what they didn't enjoy or what they're looking forward to, I think it forces the player to, one, think about it a little bit more, not just, spew mouth vomit. But two, it gives you this record, this archive of how the group has shifted. And you can sort of go back to your data elements and say, oh, that was the session I introduced this new plot element or this new game system or subsystem. How did the players react to that? How did they respond to that? And you can actually take those sort of messages and, you're not asking them to give you like a rating, which I don't think would be helpful or useful because there's no way to sort of, standardize the rating scale between your players. But I do think that, that is valuable to have that sort of written record. And I think the act of actually writing in these answers, I think really helps you and the player understand what it is that they like or dislike a little bit more. Also, having a conversation, quite frankly, for a lot of people can be very, uncomfortable. Some, I think, more the other way. I think even if the GM's asking for it, I think a lot of players, and I don't think this is totally unreasonable, are going to feel bad if they tell the GM something they didn't like, to their face in front of everybody else. It feels like you're calling them out. Or maybe something that you didn't like in the session was that so-and-so's character is way too overpowered compared to the rest of you. And, we had 3 fights and he basically took out 2 of them by himself. That might be something that you as a player feel uncomfortable bringing up in front of that other player. Now, I do think good communication is key, but let's be realistic here. That's not everybody, and certainly the kind of people who to play role-playing games aren't always the most, socially comfortable and forward. There are people who have a hard time expressing their problems and critiques, and I think that this is the best way to give them an avenue in order to do that. Now, of course, if you know your group, and then I've known them for 30 years, then maybe, your buddy can go, look, that whole thing that you did today fucking sucked. Okay, if you can have that kind of feedback, then great. I mean, then obviously the doors are open. This is about increasing the level of communication, right? It's about building bridges so that you can manage your players a little bit better. And the reason I started with the players is because, this is something that you see a lot on this channel. You have the player, you have the game. I guess you kind of have the game master. To me, the role-playing game is about the player. It's about what their adventure. They're the protagonists. So I think if you don't have a good set of players and they aren't enjoying themselves, the game is going to suffer, because at the end of the day, there's one of you and there might be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of the players. So on a percentage basis, a good, engaged, amazing game master cannot offset 4 or 5 other human beings who, quite frankly, aren't interested or aren't having a great time or don't feel connected and don't feel invested. You're going to feel like you're dragging those players along with you. And it's going to feel like a burden. It's going to feel like an energy sink, because you're going to be trying to, pull, it's like a dog on a walk that doesn't want to go. And you're just, it's not a very pleasant experience because you're constantly having to tug on them and pull on them, and they're fighting you at every twist and turn. It's not a great thing to be doing. And I think a lot of times players feel like they are just along for the game master's ride. And I want my players to feel empowered to do so. But sometimes in order to make your players feel like they are empowered, you kind of have to tell them that they are. So I'm going to get caught up here on chat really quick. Let's see here. Yeah, Ben, I agree. You have to read the room. Having an open door policy is always very, very important. Yeah. And you should encourage that you are open to that feedback. Andrew's here and he's new. Hello, new. You inspired me and my friends to play 4E Delve. Sweet. 1 to 30. Keep up the good work. Love the channel. Andrew, awesome. I assume you mean you're playing a dungeon delve, right? Which is just, again, a real fun way to just kind of experience the game. And it's pretty lightweight. It's mostly just, fights. Let's call it what it is. But it's a fun I think it's a fun way to experience the game, especially if you haven't had a ton of experience with 4th edition before. And you never know where campaigns like that could end up. So why would I always want the players' feedback when they're always wrong? Speaking from experience, I'm super self-conscious about my abilities. And so I let it get in my head and spiral, even when the thought that whenever the thought of me being a bad GM enters my head. Divorcing the emotional and mental from the facts can be hell sometimes. Yeah, John, that's a great point. The worst is when your players want to be just along for the ride. Puts a lot of unnecessary burden on the GM, in my opinion. All right, so let's talk about that. This is kind of a side tangent, but it kind of gets into like sort of game management, right? So we talked about player management. Let's talk game management. And this is sort of like, the entire megalithic structure of the game. So in my personal thought or opinion, and people might disagree with this, but I think you can really divide most campaigns, like I said, into games, I won't say high prep, medium prep. I'll just call them games that you prepare, and I'll call them games that you don't prepare. No prepping games. So the truth of the matter is even a no prep game requires a little bit of prep or a little bit of management. You need to be sort of set up for success. And again, when we talk about a prep-based game, in my personal opinion, you're talking about sort of two different ideas. The one is, and I'll just call it the adventure path. But the truth of the matter is there's a lot of games that aren't necessarily, strictly speaking, an AP that fall within the sort of confines of an adventure path. Like, for example, even if I were to go and let's say you were to buy a mega dungeon, right? Or kind of in a way, even make your own mega dungeon. Well, a mega dungeon, and you go, yeah, there's 20 levels. The players can go wherever they want. It's like a sandbox. Okay, it is, but you also understand within a certain expectation of, where the players are going to be at any point in time. So, a lot of these classic dungeons and modules sort of fall into this idea of sort of pre-written idea. Now, adventure paths often have a plot along with them. A lot of these dungeons and modules aren't necessarily full of plots. They're full of situations. They're full of sights. They're full of interesting encounters or weird, strange magics. And you just have them sort of laid out. And the players might go and encounter the strange magical fountain that reverses time, or they might never encounter that. And instead they go and fight the chimera who's been polymorphed into an elf. I don't know, just making things up. My point is, either way, the idea there is you have a lot more homework, I think, in a weird way to do, because you need to sort of make sure that you know what is available. The other option is what we call the sort of the sandbox campaign. And this varies from the no prep game because a sandbox game still requires a fair amount of prep. You need to know you need to know the world. You need to know the cultures, the geography, the history, right? If you want to be able to respond in an appropriate way to make the game truly feel like a sandbox, you kind of have to know your shit. So there's a different level in a way of prepping for a sandbox that we can talk about. Now, John said, this is worse when you want when your players want to just be along for the ride. It puts a lot of unnecessary burden on the GM. If let's call it what it is. If you have a group of players, part of game management and campaign management as a GM is knowing what you're working with. Okay? Now, I'm not trying to disparage any one particular playing style or not, but the fact of the matter is, if I go to the lumber mill and I get some great, beautiful, highly charactered wood, I am going to try to find a piece that will show that off. And I would never dream in a million years of painting it. I want the wood and the grain to speak for itself. But if I get some fairly unremarkable wood that isn't particularly interesting, then yeah, sometimes you just you make something very utilitarian and you slap some paint on it and you don't care about it. What am I trying to say here? Ben, thanks a lot and enjoy the Star Wars. I'm interested to hear how it goes. The truth of the matter is, if you have a group of players who aren't engaged in the game, or as Roxley says here, players just want to hang out with friends time and don't care about the game, then as a game master, don't try to do this. Okay? And maybe not even try to do this. You're fighting a losing battle here. So part of understanding your players is understanding, what they're going to be capable of and what they're not going to be capable of. If you have players who do not want to engage on any meaningful level and they just want to be along for the ride, and you still want those players to be your players, then I think going on a very linear adventure path is a great compromise. Because in my opinion, part of the reason why adventure paths are stressful for me is because the care and management of an adventure path, look, the truth of the matter is only the worst GMs literally go, okay, this is the adventure path and it's supposed to go like this and 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 like this. And that's the end. Okay. And the GM literally goes, no, you can only go down these paths. Okay. That's not, that's a pretty extreme example. But I think the management of an adventure path is what I will call it's kind of an illusion of choice. But, if the players get to this part of the adventure and they're supposed to go to here, but instead they end up going to here, the management part of the game is, assuming that you and the players want to sort of keep the adventure going, is how do you, it's a coding term, but it's like if the players fork the adventure path, how do you eventually reintegrate it right into the main version? So, the encounter that is supposed to happen next is this encounter, but the players did something unexpected. And as a GM, you're forced to, improvise. And ideally, the heavy-handed approach would be no, you can't go that way. That route is not available. You must go to this location. There's no other choice. But a GM who has done their prep and they understand a lot of these adventure paths have a lot of history and detail. And they do that for a reason. It's so that you have the capability to go, okay, the party went left when they were supposed to go right. So what I'm going to do is I am going to maybe make up an encounter, maybe between sessions, maybe on the fly, but it's an encounter designed to sort of bridge the gap. And yes, we will skip this encounter. Maybe I can reuse it at some future point, but I'm not going to force the players to go down that route. But this sort of pseudo encounter will lead back into the main story. And this way, the disruption, the players are still getting to make choices. They are going to have a different experience than maybe the game adventure path had designed them to be. But at the same time, let's be real here. Let's be practical here. if you buy an adventure path, a lot of times you did that because you don't have the time to create your own world. You don't have the time to create your own sandbox. Maybe you feel like you don't have the capabilities to do that thing. Maybe the idea of running a no prep game is terrifying to you and you can't even imagine it. Maybe you're playing a game that has a lot of complex rules and monster stats and encounter numbers and DCs, a game like 4th edition D&D or Pathfinder 2nd edition. And so playing prepless seems almost counterproductive, because how would you be able to quickly, come in? So the fact of the matter is, when you run an adventure path, and to kind of to Rick's point, and now we could talk about the different management ideas of how do you get the player, what causes this in the first place, right? And then, what are, how, who, and why, or what I should say, is this encounter, and how do you link it back into the main thread of the group? Because at the end of the day, a bad adventure path is one in which the players literally have no agency, and they are forced to go from encounter 1 to encounter 2 to encounter 3 in the pre-prescribed order as dictated by the game. But because of the limitations of your own time and your own capabilities, and because of maybe the limited player-driven agency of your players, if you end up with a campaign that sort of looks more like this one, and the players, they went here and then they went here, and they were supposed to go here, but they went here instead. And you kind of make up this encounter, and then they go back to 5, and then they go back to 6, and oops, they went to here. And so you're like, oh, okay, well, I feel pretty confident in how I can sort of kind of connect this over to here, and we can still have a satisfying ending. And so the group ends up, maybe they don't even have the ending that the adventure designer continued to have. But you've mostly used what the game gave you. The game gave you 8 encounters. You didn't use this one. You didn't use this one. But hopefully the material in the campaign or in the adventure path gave you the sort of ammunition and the sort of know-how that you need in order to make up encounter 4 and to make up encounter 8. Okay. So, and have it feel like the players were driving the plot. And I think that is probably like the best compromise that you can have from an adventure path. But the truth of the matter is, there's a lot of reasons why you might choose this particular form of game, because it might be that you don't have the time or the prep to make a sandbox game. You might not have the capabilities or skill to run a no prep game. Maybe you feel that way, or maybe you're playing a game that can't be played no prep, and maybe you have players that are not very player agency driven. That being said, as long as you give the players the indication, I mean, I'll use a video game analogy, even though I'm not a very big video game player. As a GM or as a player of a video game, you understand that, like, when you get to that scene at the end of the game and one of the, your fellow party members or NPCs, it does some big thing, and that if like you play through differently and you make different choices, that same event happens, but it could be a different NPC with potentially different consequences. We were talking about Final Fantasy VII, right? The question of who does Cloud go on a date with, right? At the Gold Saucer. Is it Eris? Is it Tifa? Or does it end up being Barrett? And the choices that you make throughout the game steer you into one of those 3 boxes. For some people and for many players, that's enough player agency. The feeling that, I put the game, this decision was kind of locked in, but who and what and how and why was within my player control, then I think players will appreciate that. And that's a great way to sort of build them into becoming a more proactive player and sort of building in that sort of idea. All right. Let's see here. Michael, question. I've been curious about, what if you're not sure if your campaign should be a high prep or no prep campaign? I'm not sure if my players are just chilling playing games or if they would care. Well, Michael, I think what it really comes down to, and again, we're kind of getting off on a little bit of a tangent here, is really answering this question. Okay. in your game, all right, with your players and with your style of GMing, does prep hurt or help you? That's really what it comes down to. For me personally, I've been running these games for a long time. And if I'm running a system which is very, very good at creating dynamic and unexpected outcomes, something like Blades in the Dark or Powered by the Apocalypse, a game like Avatar Legends, perhaps, I feel like prep would only serve to limit me, and I would feel very constrained. And I'll be honest with you, Michael, on this show, on this channel, when we played Quest for the Frozen Flame, which is a Pathfinder 2 AP, we played the first book of it, and it's a fairly linear adventure, if I'm being honest. That it was harder for me to run that game being prepped than it would be if the game had been prepless. Because for me, the effort of trying to stay on the road was much, much, much more effort than it would have been if I could have just gone with the flow. Those scenes in movies, in the most recent, not the first, but Dune Part 1 by Denis Villeneuve, there's a scene where he's flying the ornithopter through the Coriolis storm and he lets go of the controls, right? Because to fight against the storm would be the end of them, the destruction of them. But if they just go with the flow, then it's they actually have a better chance of survival. That's a lot of times how I feel when I'm running a game. So when I run a highly detailed and complex game like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I can feel a little frustrated because we get to a point in the game where it's like, man, this is a really cool idea. The players are really excited about it. They want to proceed down this direction. And I know, I've read my adventure, this is not the way that the adventure is supposed to go. And so I get frustrated because I feel like the adventure is leaving me hanging. And I'm playing a system, quite frankly, in my opinion, that benefits greatly from having, a fair amount of prep. So that's where I can get very frustrated. But on the other hand, if you find that going to your prep and being able to flip through the book and you read it and you know it and you're able to answer questions and, maybe you're not as comfortable coming up with stuff off the fly. Maybe you like that everything is written down. Well, then if you find that the prep-based game is beneficial to you as a game master, then that's the one I would play. So does your prep hurt you or help you? Is it something to add to or get away from? Now, as for your players, the truth of the matter is, Michael, so that's from your perspective, but from a player's perspective, the answer is do they want to step up, right? Do they want to get involved? Heyo.
Rick has tipped $15. THX Derek. I'll watch the rest of the VOD later. I have to play Star Wars with Ben now.
You're in the Star Wars game. Rick can't get enough of the Star Wars. Rick, thank you so much for that. And thank you again for suggesting tonight's topic. I hope you enjoy your game. I think that's really great. Rick, by the way, playing in a Star Wars WEG D6 system, by the way, the old one, run by Ben, another person from our Nice Last Call Discord. And again, all organized and set up on there. So there's just so many cool games that are being played every single day. And it's awesome. I'm very jealous of my people. So let's see here. So if your players, aren't going to be coming up with cool ideas and wanting to push the game in their own direction, if the players are doing more asking than telling, then I think they probably benefit from a game that has more prep or higher prep, because there's sort of two modes that you can be in a player. We all flip between them fairly frequently, but there's sort of the information gathering mode, and then there's the taking an action mode. And kind of in a way, the percentage of that mode that you find that your player group is in sort of tells you what kind of game that you need to have for your table, I think, to be successful. So, for example, if your players basically, if they ask a lot of questions and they make few decisions, this can be an area where having a lot of prep and a lot of background knowledge as a GM can be very useful, because this is how they're engaging with the game. They're engaging with it by asking questions, and they want more questions, and they want answers, and they want to sort of build up an understanding until they feel comfortable that they kind of know what the right course of action is, and then they'll just make that, one decision. So this might mean that you should be playing a fairly high prep game. But the flip side of that is if they ask few questions and instead, want to take decisive action more often, then I am of the personal belief that this is benefited from a low prep or no prep or whatever style game, because you need to be more nimble. You need to be more reactive. You need to be more able to sort of roll the punches. Now, the downside of not having a lot of prep is that if your players are asking you all of this inane detail about the elements of your campaign world, you're not going to have this awesome book or campaign setting or adventure path to go and reference and be like, oh, let me tell you all about, this devil and where he came from and why he's here and his full backstory. You have access to that in a high prep game. But if your players aren't asking about it and they don't seem to care about it, then who is that useful for? Nobody. So for me, generally speaking, I tend to play with people who they're there to take action. And so again, for me, a lot of times a low prep game runs in a lot smoother, Let's see here. Let's see. Have you seen, Christopher had a question, have you seen SMs help their players, I think they mean GMs here. Have you seen GMs help their players adopt a growth mindset and become capable of over time? Well, Christopher, I could tell you that, I have, in the sense that I feel like I am pretty good at nurturing players. And, I've had these conversations before, but the key, Christopher, to creating a growth mindset is to flip this script. Which is to say, when you have players who are mostly in this mindset, right? They're asking a lot of questions. They're not making as many decisions. The best way that I have found to get players to become more proactive, and again, there's nothing wrong with either of these styles of plays. In fact, some of the people who are playing, this style of play might be having a better and more fun time than you are playing this style of play. But I personally believe, this is my personal bias, so take that for what it means, that RPGs are at their best when players are being very proactive and they're engaging. I, as a GM, it makes it more fun for me. I'm selfish. I want to have a good time too. One of the reasons I love playing with people like Aaron and Bob, and this get to the mention of, adopting a more growth mindset. Bob, 3 years ago, was kind of boring to play with. He was brand new, so I'm going to cut him some slack. But now he's a very exciting player to play with because I don't know what he's going to do. But what do I mean by flip the script? The players ask questions, and they are expecting you to provide them with the answers. The best way in the game that I have found is to flip the question back onto them. Okay? When the players ask you a question, you ask them a question. And give them the smallest little kernel of narrative control. In fact, you can even point to it on their character sheet. So, we used this example before of, a character like a fighter or something in Pathfinder 2 makes a really high craft check to know about these golems. And the GM said, he goes, what do I know about these golems? And the GM says, the player rolls really well. And the player is now expecting to be quiet and listen and nod their head as the GM just feeds them information. Instead, the GM says, they look very familiar. Have you ever worked on golems like this before? And that's the question. And the player can say no. Or the player could say yes. And you might say, okay, so let's say the player says, no, I have never worked on golems like this. And then you say, okay, what kind of golems have you worked on? And the player is like, oh, I guess I worked on stone golems. I used to be like a carver, like a stone mason, and I used to work for a wizard, and I would carve the stone golem bodies. Now, of course, you can keep taking this as far as you want to run with it. Oh, why did the wizard need all those stone golem bodies? Did you know? And you could just keep playing with this, or you could just leave it where it is. Ask them one question, get one answer, say, okay, cool. And then if you find a way, ideally within that session, but maybe within the next session or two, to use that to change the way that the game flows, the player will feel so awesome. They will finally understand that what they said and what they did at the table changed the world. And let's being really philosophical here for a second. The reason we play TTRPGs at the end of the day is because most of us, dare I say all of us, we are powerless, right? We are cogs in a wheel. We are, being ground into dust under the, weights of billionaires and political entities too big for us. We will never be able to save the things that we want to save, to do the things that we want to do. The realities of our world are too pressing. And we want to have an impact. Of course, we want to do right by our children. And of course, we want to do right by our friends and loved ones. But all of us, I think, in some level, dream of being bigger than who we are. RPGs give you that ability to enact real, meaningful change. And I think that is where a lot of the power of role-playing games comes from. So to that end, I think if you can show the player that they have this ability to just do a little bit of world building, whether it's through their character's actions or whether it's through a question that you ask them, and then see how the story or the world or the game, the whole world has changed because of that, they will immediately start to understand that feedback loop. And again, what gets rewarded gets repeated. If the player likes that, they're going to do more of that. And then it's just going to keep building on itself over and over again. If you look at someone like Bob, when I first started playing RPGs with him, he played video games and stuff like that. He was just in a completely, totally ask questions, make very few decisions mindset. But I kept asking him questions. I kept asking him to fill in details. I kept asking him to fill in details about his past, about something else's past, about something about the current event that is going on right now. And as a result, he became more comfortable, more confident in building in his version of what the world should look like. And bit by bit, that allowed him to take a greater share of ownership of the campaign. Because, the true story is that the key to campaign management is not managing the campaign and the players as a GM. It's everyone, right? It's the players too, it's their campaign as well. And I think that the real way to get the best campaign management is when your players are what I like to call active partners in the campaign. Not just passive investors, not just passive observers, not a silent partner, but an active proactive, engaged, caring partner in the game. And I love sitting down with a group of players and feeling like I have a team, that I have put together a team that is going to help me and I am going to help them. And together we are going to create awesome experiences and memories and tell really funny stories and really good stories and really cringy stories, but it's going to be our stories. And that is very, very empowering to me in role-playing games. All right. No Beer says, I miss running prepless PF1. I kind of wish they brought back random tables back. We were talking about this the other, just like today, I think, or maybe yesterday, about how there's no random tables anymore. Oh yeah. Steven and I yesterday on Roll for Combat, we were talking about how, like, I love random tables. I love random tables, but they got rid of them because of what the reason that you're saying is everything needs to be balanced. And if you're level 2 or 3 and suddenly somebody ends up with a, +2 greater striking weapon. Now I can tell you, that campaign, that weapon might end up being legendary. It'd be something that your kids are telling their grandkids about. Oh, do you remember when Granddad's campaign found the sword of slaying? But the games kind of don't want you to do that because it might make the game unbalanced and it might make the game unfun for other players. And so there's other consideration. I'm not hand waving those concerns, by the way. I think they are legitimate. Chris, thank you. $10. Thank you thanks for the great answer. You got me thinking, and thanks for being generous about my typo. Oh yeah. Listen, it's not my first rodeo, Chris. I know what you're trying to say. But thank you very much. That's a very generous super chat for that. But yeah, I find that asking people about the game and really just saying, oh, okay. And then showing them how what they said changed the world. I remember the best example I could ever think of this is I was playing Dungeon World up at my local game store, and a group of people I played Magic with, but a group of them had played some D&D and stuff like that, and they were begging me to run a game for them. And I said, okay, I'm going to run you a Powered by the Apocalypse game. I'm going to run you Dungeon World, or a hack thereof. And it was all it was all prepless. I just asked them some questions, real professional stuff. But these were people who had mostly played traditional RPGs. And at one point, they were making their way through some sort of tunnel in a volcano, very Lord of the Rings-esque. And a giant spider demon thing started crawling down towards them, reminiscent of Shelob. And a player wanted to know if he knew what it was. So I asked him to make a spout lore check, which he did, and he got like a 10 or 11. And I said, I'm like, you do know what this is. This is the legendary whatever. And he goes, oh, what does it do? What does she do? And I said, well, you're the expert. You're the wizard. You're the one who studied. You tell me what she does. And the player kind of balked for a moment. And he basically was trying to very what's the word? Kind of like smugly be like, oh, well, she's known for having a massive ruby embedded into her like abdomen or thorax or chest or something like that is supposed to be worth so much money, like part of her growth. And I went, oh, okay, great. And he was kind of surprised that I said that because I don't care. And then I go, but I said, what terrible secret does the ruby hold? And he's like, oh, well, and at this point he was kind of didn't realize at first what he was doing. He was making the game harder for himself. But I was like, he's like, oh, it can project the fire that does not die, and it's like a beam of liquid heat. And I went, oh, sweet, awesome. And then they had to fight this thing, and it used its beam of fire that will not die. And he kind of understood, wow, I kind of fucked myself there. But he realized in that moment he wasn't answering as a player trying to win the game. He was answering as a player who wanted to see what that would look like. He was answering it as a player who wanted to see what a fight versus a spider that had a beam of liquid death would fundamentally look like. And more important than that, his character, his decisions ultimately changed that. And then to the point where when it died, You know, they naturally were like, oh, we take the gem, you know, because does it still have its power? You know, it's like Medusa. And I was like, oh yeah, it's totally like Medusa, you know, it's good for one last, you know, shot. And they were like, awesome. And then they used that later in the adventure to get past a pretty meaningful problem or encounter. And he realized, he's like, wait a second, you couldn't have thought ahead of time that that's how we would solve that issue, because that item didn't even exist until I pulled it out of my ass. And I said, that is exactly right. And at that moment that it like clicked for him, he's like, you're not telling us this story. We're telling this story to ourselves. And I was like, yeah, ding, ding, ding. Congratulations. You win. And for him, that was a very empowering moment, and one that I remember very well. So shout out to you, Dan, if you're watching, which I don't think he is. Was it the Gygax Book of Names that had the different Earth cultures as well as elves, dwarves, etc.? Beowulf, it was. I'm seeing if I had it right near me. The name of the book is Gary Gygax's Extraordinary Book of Names. That's the name of the book. It's more like which prep to focus on. We started with a specific module to play in mind, my idea, but the players have really gone off the rails and they're really liking where they're going. Well, Michael, I mean, this is a tough choice. You know, the truth be told, Michael, is if your players are enjoying where they're going, my recommendation is to go with that. That being said, there might be practical reasons and considerations to take into account. You may not have the time or the ability. You already spent the money. In which case, I think having a legitimate, open conversation with them and saying, hey, look, this is awesome. I love that we're going in this way and direction, but that wasn't really what I had prepped or focused on, and I don't have the time. The other option, if you want to be a little more subtle about it, is, as I said, figure out a way to arc their choices and still allow those choices to be meaningful back into the main story game. I'm curious what game or what setting or what game you're playing, Michael. Jason says, I just started a West Marches style game, and I am directing more as a player more than I have ever been before. So far, it's been great. That sounds amazing. I love it. London, better late than never. Hi, everyone. Hello, London. Ken says, I play in Rick's Traveler game, and it's fantastic. Yeah, a lot of people have a lot, all the players have really good things to say about Rick's Traveler game. And I just love that he's, exposing people to new games, which I think is fantastic. C. Calendaric says, I do find it odd when people ask for things like the square mileage of a town. Some people are very weird. I don't know how to describe it. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know the square mileage of the town I live in. So it's kind of like, I don't know. Who cares? But you're right. Some people. Random tables in PF Second Edition get PCs killed. Pencil Mage, don't I know it? We just finished up playing Abomination Vaults, and I used random encounters because the book has a throwaway thing in the beginning where it says, we didn't put random encounters in this game, but you could have random encounters in this game. And I went, good enough for me. So I made random encounters, and sure enough, I killed players because of the random encounters, or killed PCs, I should say. Eloy agrees. Awesome. So much. Thank you. Questions and a bit of a game of chicken. Yeah. I love it. Of PC's daring and why yesing and, is so important. Eventually players start asking themselves and each other questions. And Eloy, you bring up such a great example of something here, which I actually, it's up because I was literally reading it because it's one of my favorite games of all time. So this is from the Powered by the Apocalypse game, Avatar Legends from Magpie. And this is based off of Avatar Last Airbender and Avatar whatever. And there's only a couple basic moves in the game, which is the game's way of saying, what is this game about? What are the things that you do in this game that we want rules to cover? And, there's assessing a situation, there's intimidating, pleading, pushing your luck, relying on your skills and training, and tricking someone. So that's what the game is telling you it cares about. But one of the things the game cares about is guiding and comforting, right? If you've ever watched Avatar, you know what this looks like in the scene. You know, it's Zuko and Iroh sharing a moment. It's Katara comforting Aang. It's Sokka trying to make someone laugh or feel better. So in this game, you can try to basically heal someone by trying to be honestly guide them and comfort them, and you roll. But if you succeed, they embrace your guidance and comfort. Now, remember, this is a player move made against another player. So, in other words, there's no GM involved here, okay? If they hit, which means that they roll 7 or higher, the person who got hit gets to choose one. And if they choose, they can embrace your guidance and comfort. They may clear a condition or to fatigue. In other words, they can heal. But the person who is guiding and comfort you can ask you a question, and you must answer honestly. And this is where, as a player at the table, I can ask a question of another player. Now, you might be thinking like, well, what kind of you mean like who do you secretly serve? No, nothing like that. You might ask them a question that the player themselves doesn't know the answer to. And you are going to put them on the spot to answer, because whatever they answer is the truth and must be the truth. So as an example, if we were playing Avatar Legends and I was playing a character who is obsessed with, destroying the Earth Nation because Kuvira destroyed my town, and I, absolutely hate the Earth Nation, and I won't stop until I see the Earth Nation return to whatever. And another character, guides me and comforts me, and they ask me, and I say, oh, I'll embrace the comfort, and they go, cool, I want to get healed, and then they go, okay, let me ask you a question. What would allow you to forgive the Earth Kingdom? And at that moment, my player, I have to say something, and whatever I say is the truth. It becomes a truth for the rest of the game. But this is players asking each other questions, and it's me as a player making something up or answering a question. Maybe I've thought about this. Maybe I haven't thought about this. But now we get to talk about it. And more importantly, we can even pause the conversation that is happening in character and say, oh man, geez, guys, that's a great question. I don't know. Well, and then the GM might say, well, the first thing is the answer, is there anything? Or is there nothing? Is there absolutely nothing that would stop you? And then, the player kind of thinks about their character, and they think about the arc that they want their character to have. And they go, no, that doesn't seem right. I feel like there should be something that could, kind of heal this wound. And as a group, you might sit there and talk about it and bang your heads against the wall. But at the end of the day, you're going to come up with an answer, and it's on you, and you say it, and now it's true. So stuff like this, again, I understand everybody plays role-playing games for different reasons. Stuff like this is why I play role-playing games, mostly. Sometimes I like to kill stuff too. So let's not undersell that. Let's see. Creative Role-Playing says, I force myself to improv just for the practice. It's possibly the most critical skill for a GM to master because there's no way to prepare for everything. I think it is one of the most important skills for sure. Absolutely. At the end of the day, I think the best skill to being a game master is honestly being open, honest with your players and listening to them and trying to collaborate with them rather than try to compete with them. I think, to me, that is probably the most important skill. Tomorrow, my party will probably finish book 1 of AV. Do I end the story there, or do I dare brave the hellish battle of the bands? To be fair, Battle of the Bands is level 6. So, it's a great question, Jackal Torn Moons. Book 4 ends pretty nicely. I do like it. Started a Space Narwhal started BG3 tonight. If she stops, we'll join in. Otherwise, I'm on the VOD. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Waits. The cheapest I found the name book for is $300. Yeah, it's an older one. It's not around as much. So again, going back to what we were saying before with game management, if you are interested in running a prep game or even a sandbox game, ultimately what this really comes down to is you got to know your prep. We've talked about this on this stream before, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But I said before, it's kind of like homework. Now, the advantage of the adventure path or the dungeons or the modules is you basically just have to like read the next chapter ahead and hopefully have a fundamental understanding of what is going on in the adventure. But in the case of a sandbox, this can actually be a lot harder. And it really depends on how deep into the tank you want to go. Because while I don't think that a player should feel like they have to literally prep every single thing in their sandbox, in fact, I think that's a mistake. The fact of the matter is, a lot of times with a sandbox as a GM, you should know a good deal, a great deal even, about the world, the culture, the setting, shaping it, the history, the geography, because you want to be able to respond in a way that is internally consistent to your sandbox game. A lot of sandbox games end up being kind of simulationist, right? And so as a result, players want to feel like they're living in a real world. And so it kind of puts a lot of pressure on you to sort of know your shit. If you look at something like Legend of the Five Rings, I, through my own interest, have read a lot about the world of Rokugan and the different clans and the different gods and the way that religion and spirits and Bushido and everything all sort of interact. So I feel like I am fairly well knowledgeable about the workings of this fantasy world, this pretend world. And so as a result, I feel much more empowered to sort of run my players through a sandbox because I already know, like if they ask me a question about a city, I may not know every detail about the city, but I can, I know something. I know enough to get me to the next session. And that's where I think sandbox could come into handy. If you're going to go with no prep, and I said before that you still need to prep, because I think if you're going to go with a no prep game, or a low prep game, then we gotta talk about the fact that as a GM, you still need to have some management, and some of this could be private, and some of this could be public. Now we've talked about before on this channel about fronts. Okay. And all a front is it's an idea from Dungeon World, and you kind of expand this into clocks, if you will. But all the idea of a front is there's a threat. Okay. Or it doesn't necessarily have to be a threat. It could also just be, an event that you understand is part of your game world. And fundamentally, you want to understand, something that is going to pose a threat, something that's going to have a significant impact on the game world. And, this could be, kind of persons, places, or things, right? This could be a major faction. This could be an organization, like a religion or a nation. It could be an individual, a great and powerful wizard who is trying to do blank. It could be a monster, right? It could be an army. So it's some sort of, or potentially it could sort of be some sort of something less, more abstract, something more primal, right? The great conjunction is coming. Either way, this is an element of your game. Now, I'm not saying you have to expand every single thing about this game, but what you do want to understand is what is the threat, okay? Or what's going to happen? In other words, if this event is able to play out, so what? As a GM, you should be totally ready to sort of, line up all your darlings and kill them. But you should know what's at stake, right? What's at stake here? So as an example, let's use, right? We'll say that the threat is I'm going to use something from the Red Hand of Doom. Okay? This is a famous adventure module, right? About an army of goblinoids, mostly hobgoblins, who are under the command of a sort of aspect of Tiamat who are marching across the Elser Vale to destroy it. Okay, so what is the threat? Okay, well, the threat here is, widespread destruction, looting, and death. Because, this it seems silly, but this is an existential threat. This is going to end the world, right? For our region, for this Elser Vale. That is the stakes of this Red Hand of Doom. If allowed to proceed, then the group this is what's going to happen. It doesn't always have to be this big, although ideally, if you're tracking it, it should at least be something that the PCs care about, right? So you want to know what happens if the PCs fail. What happens if if they just don't get involved, all right? Then we have what the game calls portents, which is basically what are some of the signposts along the way to this final inevitable doom or threat, okay? So it might be like, the village of, I don't know, Ulm is destroyed. Maybe this is like the initial probe by the army into the Elser Vale, and they destroy a village. Everyone hears about the destruction of this village. And then maybe next, the elves of the Kiritor are wiped out. Right? Maybe the army moves in and elves could have been allies, or maybe they're not allies, whatever, they get destroyed. And then the third thing that happens is, maybe, I don't know, some other city or something like that. I'm just making stuff up. But the fourth thing is Brindle, the great capital city, okay, is besieged. And finally, 5, right, Brindle is destroyed. Now, here's the thing. This is what's important. You are not, and obviously with the destruction of Brindle, right, the Elser Vale is lost fundamentally. But here's the thing to understand: this isn't a plot. This is a prepless game. This is a no prep, low prep game. I, as a GM, am merely saying, if the PCs don't get involved, this is what's going to happen. If the PCs fail or they fuck around a lot, this is what's going to happen. But I'm expecting that the PCs will care and that the PCs won't completely fail. And so this inevitably is going to get shifted or changed. But it lets me know what the motivation is and what's going to be happening next. When the party comes in and tries to, defend Ulm, and maybe they are successful, but then I know that the army of the Red Hand, maybe they say, we need to double down or focus our attentions on wiping out the elves before the humans and the elves can form an alliance. And so as a group, as a GM, I am now reacting to what the players did by trying to continue to act out my plan. I'm putting myself into the mindset of sort of the leader or the motivation of this army. Maybe it's the leader, maybe it's, the collective army's will as a whole. But the prep I am doing is basically just having a note card. And again, the players may not know all this, but I do. But it's not a plot. It's not a plot. It is merely a front. It is a possible future. And I'm expecting, in fact, I am hoping that the players will disrupt this front and, change things around. Now, ideally, too, what I'm looking to do in a no prep or low prep game is I am trying to find every opportunity I can to link these ideas back to the PCs, right? And that could be through, NPCs. That could be through motivations that the PCs have. That could be from goals or desires the PCs have. So, for example, maybe the players, maybe one of their maybe one of the characters is from the Kiritor elves. That's their people. And you think, oh, okay, great. So now I can create a scenario where the army is marching on the Kiritor elves, but they are also making, unmitigated progress down into the heartlands of the Vale. And the players have to make a choice. And there's no really good solution. But the player who suddenly feels much more compelled because my people are involved and I have to save them. Suddenly you have an interesting point of conflict. And of course, if you really want more conflict in your game, you could maybe have another player have a reason that they want to go do the other thing. So part of it is kind of figuring out ways that you can tie the party into these plot elements and or situational elements. And that way, if it comes up, you have something to work with. Now, I also am a big fan of the Prepless game too, of saying, hey, there's nothing wrong with sharing this information with your players to a certain degree. I think sharing it to a certain degree is okay. And sometimes you could do that with clocks, right? So, for example, if the army, the party is in Ulm and the Red Hand is marching towards the elves, you might make a clock and put it on the table and say, okay, this is a horribly drawn 8 clock. There we go. So we have an 8 clock here and it's, the elves are destroyed. And you put this on an index card or you put this on your VTT and you put this right down into the middle of the table. And, as things are happening, you're ticking this down and the players can feel the growing pressure of the more and more of the thing happening towards the elves being destroyed. And they might be trying to do other things. They're trying to save the village of Ulm. But at the same time, this is getting more and more closely to becoming true. And so suddenly the players are like, we don't have enough time. We don't have enough ability. We got to be everywhere. We want to do everything. And how much you let the PCs, how much you twist the knife depends a lot on the tone of the game that you're trying to do. But I think sharing this information is okay because it allows the players to make proactive decisions. If an entire session is basically just kind of around like, do we save the elves or do we save the village of Ulm? And if the players are kind of grappling with that, and at the end of the day, the players make a decision, and that is going to impact the outcome of your campaign, then that to me is a successful, session. Because again, when you're playing Prepless, it's really more about making sure the PCs have enough options available to them. All right. So, we kind of talked about stuff all over the place here. Do we have any other questions in chat? Does anybody want to throw something out there, something they wanted to ask, but I was kind of going off on a rant, and so they didn't want to stop me? Something that maybe you struggle with or that you want to deal with? I myself personally, I like to be I like to be very collaborative with my players in my campaign management. When I'm playing an adventure path, if there's something that, quite frankly, is kind of critical and I kind of need my players' buy-in for it, a lot of times I will talk to them. I will talk to them before the campaign begins. I will talk to them sort of as the campaign is going through, and I will say, hey, this campaign is about this type of thing, and it would be really useful if one of your characters was connected to that in some way, and then we could tie you into the campaign a little bit more. I like to be very hands-on with my players and sort of involve them in the campaign management to a certain degree. Now, someone asked, how do you keep track of all the NPCs and all this other stuff? Well, earlier. So my suggestion is, or what I typically do is I just use note cards. I'm a big fan of note cards. I use a lot of note cards. I use like 3x5 note cards. I have, the NPC. I have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 bullet points about the NPC that I need to know. I usually write something like, what is their quirk, or what is their like obvious demeanor, something that'll really stand out. And like, talks with a lisp, or, has a peg leg, has a shining elven blade. I don't know, something that makes the NPC stand out. And then I also have, what is the character's motivation? What does this NPC want to get out of the PCs? And then again, I talked about this before on the NPC stream. There might be like a SWOT, right? What is the NPC's strength? What is the NPC's weakness? What is the NPC's opportunity that can help the party? And what is the NPC's threat? Like what about this NPC could get the party in trouble? I actually completely agree with Compy here. Pathfinder's player's guides are really good for this. I think that they could be better, but I think they actually are really quite good at kind of being like, hey, this is what this campaign is and isn't about. And, sure, you can make whatever character you want to make, but the truth of the matter is you would be better served by making sure that you kind of align with this. And I think that whether you're playing an AP or not, I think having those conversations with your group, both at the beginning, but also as the campaign proceeds, to sort of to work to that end. So I like to put my NPCs onto notes. Actually, I don't do this as much anymore, and maybe I should. One of the rules of Dungeon Craft is whenever you design or it comes up or something is created about your campaign world, you should create a secret attached to it. There should be something, some sort of mystery, something that the party can figure out later or find out later. And back in the day, I used to take these secrets and I would write them onto note cards. And I had a box, one of those index card Rolodexes full of these notes, and they were kind of color coded. But a lot of times what I would do is pull one of these notes out, one of these secrets out at random. And I would then try to connect what that secret was to whatever was going on in the game. Now, for me, this was mostly at this time dungeons. Okay. So like, for example, let's say while building a campaign world, you decide that, maybe demons are really a big part of your game. Maybe you're kind of using a non-standard cosmology. Maybe demon just means like, being from another darker dimension. And you're like, oh, there's the battle between the elves and the demons. And maybe your dungeon, I love mega dungeons. So, but maybe your module or your dungeon or your adventure, or maybe your campaign world in some way is shaped by the great demon war, right? The elves and the demons, and that kind of laid the foundation for your game world. Maybe that was the big, kind of World War, post-apocalyptic kind of thing that happened. So you're like, oh, that's an important thing in my campaign. I'm going to create a secret to that. And maybe you write down that, the elves created the demons. And you're like, oh, isn't that exactly what the Children of the Forest did with the Nightwalkers? Yeah, maybe it is. But your players don't necessarily know that. And if they do determine it, they'll probably be like, oh, cool. It's like the Nightwalkers, Anyways, so you say, oh, the elves actually, they're the ones who brought the demons here to begin with. That's a secret. That's like a big campaign thing that may have huge implications or not. It could just be a secret. You write that down onto your note card and you put it into your box, and then you're designing an adventure or a room or a chamber or something or an NPC, and you reach into your box and you pull out this note card. And now you go, okay, I need to connect this secret to this game element and think about what are the possible implications because of that. Maybe it's an NPC, it's a sage that has become really important to the party, and it's completely unrelated to any of this. And you pull out that secret and you go, oh, maybe this sage, this human sage, has been doing research and is getting close to uncovering this secret. And the elves know that he's getting close, and they're going to try to send assassins to kill him. And you don't think it any further than that. You're like, and then when the party stops the assassins, they get involved in a political elven coup. No, just stop there. But now you've created this really, really interesting plot thread that could potentially lead down an area that no one expected, or the party could not care. And maybe the sage just gets assassinated, and maybe the party goes, damn, he probably owed somebody gambling money, and they move on. And that's okay. That's okay. That secret is there for another time or another place, but you gotta give yourself chances to do it. So anyways, so that's how I love to use NPCs and secrets and ideas and try to combine them, sort of together. As for remembering names of people, places, things, write that shit down. Yeah. You gotta take some notes. I will not remember, especially if I'm playing a game like Legend of the Five Rings, where characters have, these very Japanese or Chinese sounding names. I'm not necessarily the most fluent speaker. I got to write them down, Let's see here. Dr. Waite says, I think I need a break from APs and run shorter adventures, but I also get tired of 5 shots. Well, I think there's a ground between APs and 5 shots, and that is a campaign that is composed of discrete adventure elements. We're used to thinking of adventures as basically, really, honestly, if you play a 6-episode AP, it's really just one serialized adventure. It's one adventure that goes from level 1 to 20. It's all part of the same story. It's all part of the same thread. It's all part of this thing. And that isn't the way your campaign has to be. The common thread in your campaign doesn't have to be the plot or the NPCs or their master scheme. The common thread could be the players. And the arcs that you explore aren't the plot arcs or the story arcs or the world arcs. It's the character arcs. So to think of this as an example, you could have a campaign where you have, I don't know, let's just make this up. Like maybe you have a fighter or, like a fighter who's in the campaign, but like maybe the player's like, oh, but my character like could have been a paladin, but something happened and he is trying to redeem himself, right, for what he did. So you could think of it from a story perspective that the arc of this character, is from, disgraced character and, forgives himself and, and then maybe you're thinking like, I'd like to see how that plays out. You don't necessarily have to have like this written in stone what happens to himself. And maybe he becomes a paladin again, at the end. He regains his holy powers or something. That's a PC, by the way. Okay. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is what's going to happen. You're just, thinking out loud. But point is, you could have a series of adventures. Okay. This is like levels 1 through 3. This is like levels 4 through 6. This is level 7 through 10. And each of these adventures is completely independent of the other ones. Right? This is a town that is being attacked by werewolves. I mean, it's a little too low level. This is a town that is being attacked by goblins, and the party has to go and deal with the goblins. And then in the next adventure, there is, an old, an ancient elven ruin in the forests that is said to possess great treasures and secrets of a lost time, and strange creatures from time, out of myth and legend and out of time have been appearing in the forest, destroying villages and destroying homes, and the party is sent to deal with it. And then maybe they go to a third adventure where, werewolves are running rampant through the city streets, or were-rats are running rampant through the city streets, and the party has to deal with it. None of these adventures have anything to do with one another. I mean, they might have little connections, and that's totally fine. But what stays is your PC. And looking for ways that in each of these adventures or in each of these episodes, how your character continues to progress down their character arc towards forgiveness, and looking for opportunities in each of these discrete events to find a way to, heal or move forward, or maybe not come to pass. And maybe there's something in an adventure that, it reminds him of his failure in the past. And it's that adventure maybe has a little bit more of an importance to your character. But the thread that is being told here is you, the PC, not the GM storyline. I mean, the truth of the matter is, in a lot of adventure paths, the main character, the protagonist, the one who's actually taking actions, is usually not the players. The players are almost always the antagonists of the villain, which is to say, the villain has a plan. The villain is doing stuff, and the players are just reacting to it and trying, and usually succeeding, at stopping them. So, they're not actually doing anything themselves. All they are doing is negating. And so in a weird way, the main character of Rise of the Rune Lords is Rune Lord Karzug, right? And maybe, Mokmurian or something for the vast majority of the game, because the person who is really calling the shots and doing stuff and taking actions and has motivations and goals and things that they want to accomplish, the person who is doing that is not the PCs. It's the villain. It's the NPCs. And I don't think the villain having a motivation or plan is a bad thing. I think far from it. I think it's a good thing. But the players themselves don't have any motivations, Or a lot of times the players do have motivations. They're completely unrelated to the events at hand. They're like, their motivation is, I want to retire and own my own blacksmith shop. And it's like, that doesn't feel like it's on the same scale as what we're talking about here. Dan, I likely going to run Blades in the Dark, but I'm not a confident GM. What's needed to be prepared and feel prepared? Dan, I think Thursday we're going to do some Forged in the Dark talk. So Dan, maybe come back and ask this question on Thursday. We're going to be back on Thursday and we're going to talk about it. But there's some stuff I wanted to get off my chest. No, just like about Forged in the Dark games that I want to talk about there. So Donnie says, world management. As a very old world GM, I have used a lot of management tools. Realmworks was a favorite, but using World Anvil right now, OneNote is good for things like NPC management too. Yeah, I used to use OneNote quite a bit. Smith used to use World Anvil all the time. Many campaigns were on World Anvil. Yeah, I mean, those are fantastic tools, and I think people. I used to use OneNote quite a bit as well. That's being more like the logistics of game management, right? Like, how do you manage it? But at the same time, I do love paper and pencil. I love note cards. I love having, something written down on a note card that I can show people, and I can look at it. I can lay it out on my table, and I can maybe take 2 clocks or 2 fronts or 2 NPCs and 2 secrets and kind of look at them together and get a brainstorm and think, oh, that'd be a cool idea. Let's explore that and see where it takes us. There's a very tactile nature to that I really, really enjoy. Let's see here. What's your opinion on music during a session? I'm a fan of it in theory, but changing the music constantly between scenes can take players out of the immersion. Owen, you nailed it. Music is fine, but music can run into the problem that I see with some people who are playing on Foundry, VTT, where the technology becomes a hurdle. If you've got music playing and it's seamless and you can change it on the fly and great, great. Or you have a great track that just plays for the whole scene, great. But if you have to stop and look through your tracks and then you start playing one track and you kind of go, no, that's not a good track. Let me try another one. And then you try another track and you're like, no, that's not a good one. And the players are just sitting here going, come on, man, it's just the music. We don't care. That's a problem. And then you shouldn't be doing that. Interestingly that you mentioned that. We used to play music in our superhero games, but one of my players managed the music, believe it or not. So when a scene would start, I would just be describing things. They'd be listening. And, they would start going on their laptop and finding some music. And then within a minute or two, they would find a track that felt like it was really appropriate. And the music would, softly fill in and everybody would nod and laugh. And for me, I just offloaded it to that player and they would come up with some really great stuff. And then of course it was a superhero game. It was a little bit more, tongue in cheek and a little less serious, but it still was because I agree with you. I think that the music can be a distraction. For sure. Especially on VTTs. Got to be very careful with this. This is true of almost anything. If you've been in a Teams meeting, you know this. You could be in a crowded room, hundreds of people, packed bar or whatever, even a music venue, and your friend could be talking to you. Maybe even they're a little distance away, and you can hear them. You have the ability to sort out all the different sounds, and your brain can figure that out. But when 6 people are talking at once on a Teams call, it's just gobbledygook. And the same thing's true with music. I find that music in person is a lot less distracting than music over the VTT, because when it's over the VTT, the music, whatever the player is saying, whatever the GM is saying, whatever, it all gets kind of combined into one feed, and your ear just hears it all as one mess. I never want the music and what another player is saying or what I'm saying to be in competition. I always want to make sure the music is well down here, and I definitely do not want to disrupt anybody. I think on some VTTs, right, like the players can individually control the volume of their music. If that is a possibility, that is definitely a good idea, because that way the player can say, I don't want to listen to this music, and they can just turn it off. Right, exactly. It could be very distracting, and it can be very difficult to hear the GM. So definitely give your players that option. And also remember, this is part of what you ask questions for and get their feedback from, Setting up playlists is crucial to my prep. Yeah, we didn't really get into it, but there's some meta elements to running a game as well. We talked a little bit about the players, but there's if you're using Dwarven Forge or you're running a VTT, you may have to do some work in getting maps set up. You may have to have minis available or tokens pre-made. If you're using music, you should have your playlist set up, you're running a game, not making a multimedia experience, in my opinion. And Todd, I agree with you 100%. However, the truth of the matter is that for some players and for many GMs, that line is becoming more blurred each and every single day. I think that a lot of people now view the RPG experience synonymously with the multimedia experience. And there's a lot of people who I think feel obligated, especially when they're playing on a VTT, there's all these mods. I want to have it so that the torches flicker and give off light that's appropriate. And I want to make sure all the walls are correctly, outlined so that vision works. And I want to have sound effects. And when you open the door, I want to make a sound. And I want to set this trap up to be on a macro so that when a character's token moves into that square, the floor tile disappears and is replaced by a spiked pit trap. And there's a sound effect of like somebody going, like a Wilhelm scream. That to me is prep, and that is campaign management that I do not want to do. And that is entirely up to you and your game and your purpose. That being said, in my opinion, all of that stuff is the icing. It's the frosting on the cake. Okay? The core of your game has to be a good game. I think there are some GMs out there who think that if I put enough shit sprinkled onto my game, that it can make a bad game into a good game. And then they're wondering why their game isn't as good as they want it to be. And it could be that you're focusing on the wrong things. I'm not saying it's a distraction or a detractor now, but I could see a world where more and more GMs get more convinced and more obsessed with making sure that their, macro is set up correctly than they are with making sure that they have a compelling game situation that is going to engage and entertain their players. Owen, well said, says, as I GM more and more, I've come to realize that giving the players control over the game, not just their characters, is generally a good idea. And that's not true for every single character, and that's not true for every single campaign. That's definitely not true for every single player. But I firmly believe that to get the most out of the RPG experience, this is true. This has to happen. Walls are, I'll be honest with you. When like Roll20 first came out, I was like, oh shit, this thing is awesome. Look at all the vision tools, and people could see. It was really awesome. And then Foundry, and now I just find myself like, I want to just be like, I want to learn how to use Albert Rodeo and just call it a day, or just give me a basic whiteboard and some basic stuff that we can move around, and we'll just call it a day. Because, I mean, the truth of the matter is, in real life, a long time ago, as a group, we bought thousands of dollars, many thousands of dollars of Dwarven Forge terrain. Both the old stuff, the stuff that used to be made out of like resin, and the newer stuff that's made out of acrylic. So, I mean, we have enough Dwarven Forge that we could cover probably 2 pool tables, maybe 3 pool tables. We have a lot of Dwarven Forge. And you know what? The truth is, it over the last 20 years, I would say it has been barely used. Whereas, my Chessex battle mats, or I really love tact tiles, which are these sort of plastic kind of 10-inch by 10-inch tiles that have a grid on them, and they've got like puzzle piece sides, and they can click into one another, so you can kind of make it as big as you want it to be. Dry erase. I have used those to death. And as a game master, I just find that the time I spend setting up these cool, done Dwarven Forge experiences, the juice is not worth the squeeze. I find that whether I do it or not, the gameplay is ultimately what makes my game good. Carzonia, I mean, there's nothing wrong with this. Let me be very clear about this. That is awesome. And if your group appreciates it and they're digging it and it's not distracting you from running the game and you love doing it, perfect. It's awesome. I cannot, it's like, making a prop to hand out to your players. You take some paper and you burn some of the edges and you stain it with coffee and you write on it with a calligraphy pen and you hand them the note. That could be very fun. I mean, that is a very engaging and emergent experience, 100%. But, you may not have the time for it. So, and don't let the note be the thing that was cool about your game, right? At the end of the day, it should be about the players and what they're doing, Isaiah says, I want that experience, but APs have atrophied my player initiative. Yeah. It's funny. Somebody from our Discord, Ayla, said, or no, I don't know if it was Ayla. They said something, we were talking about this, and they said, it's funny. They were like, when I had a new player in my campaign, they actually were really creative, and they were always coming up with these really cool ideas. But she was like, but we were playing Adventure Paths, and now that player has been conditioned and learned not to be creative because it creates more problems than it creates solutions. And she's like, so now he started off as being really like, oh, anything could go and cool ideas. And now he's like, okay, I'll do what the game wants me to do. I'll do what the game wants me to do. That could be, problematic. Yeah, I mean, we're kind of getting more into like campaign planning here, but like, there's nothing wrong with relying on tropes and common story elements. People understand them. We call this resonance, the idea of you look at something, you go, oh, that's just like this, and you're like, cool. Yeah, you get it. We have a common point of reference here. It's just like how Aragorn was trying to become king. And you're like, cool. That's great. It's fantastic. You get it. I get it. We're all on the same page, right? That's all we're trying to do is get onto the same page. Lex, I'm running my first session on Saturday. Congratulations. The nerves are crazy. Do you ever feel fully prepared? Lex, no. But also, Lex, I don't want to feel fully prepared because you should turn that fear into what you enjoy. It is the unknown. That's why we play, Lex. We play to find out what's going to happen. If we already know what's going to happen, then why are we playing? What's the point of playing? You are going there because you don't have everything figured out, because you don't know what's going to happen. Your players are going to delight you and surprise you, and maybe delight and surprise themselves. that is the core essence of why we do what we do. And for me, when, I don't feel prepared, that's great, because that means the players are truly free to do whatever they want to have. What's the line from Fight Club? It's only when we lose everything that we're free to do anything. So it's kind of the same way, right? In a weird way. The less prepped you are, the less skin in the game you have, and the more subconsciously that you are ready to just say, yeah, fuck it, let's go with the flow. I've given this example before, but we played a game of Avatar Legends, Avatar: The Last Airbender, at Origins this year, and a character, a young scamp PC, was trying to evade a Earth Nation or Fire Nation patrol or something, and they ducked down an alley and they rolled badly, and I was like, a hand reaches out from a doorway, grabs you, pulls you into the street before the guards come upon you, and slams the door shut. And everyone's like, oh, who is this? Who is this person? And the truth of the matter is, I didn't know. I was like, oh, we'll get back to it. And I was like, I'll think of something. And then some other player was like, oh, what if it's his dad? And everyone laughed. And I was just like, oh shit, that's a way better idea than I had. I don't even remember what my idea was, quite honestly, because their idea was so much better. And so then I was like, you're right, it is your dad. What are you doing here, Dad? What are you doing here, son? I told you to stay out of this. And this whole thing just came out, and this whole arc of this character earning the respect of his father, and his father learning to let go, and that his young son was now a man and capable of taking his own risks and making his own decisions. This whole arc emerged for this character and this PC. But I didn't have any of it planned. And so it was truly something that we as a group created together. I can't point to any one character and say, you did this. It was all of us. And I love that. I love that feeling of true collaboration, that Boothby, the hits with your group just never stop coming, do they? RPG Music said it right, exactly right. Let's see here. How would you design a diceless game? A player of mine brought this up, and I found it very strange. They didn't like the randomness and wanted a stamina use style system to avoid making dice rolls. Yeah, that's how you do it. I mean, what do I mean by that? What I mean is, a diceless game would ideally be that the characters have available a pool of resource, and essentially think of it as like you give them $100, and now you're asking them, do you want to buy this or not? How important is it to you that you get this? And you're asking them to budget essentially their resources to determine, do I care enough about this that I am willing to spend my resources in order to achieve some degree of success? And, you could even go to a Powered by the Apocalypse thing, where it's like a character's like, well, they're like, I want to get all the prisoners out. And you go, okay, let's say you have 100 points. And you go, okay, well, if you want to get all the prisoners out, that's going to cost you 20 points. And the player's like, ooh. And you're like, but if you just want to get your ally out, it'll only cost 5. And the player's like, do I care? What would my character do? Do I care? Does my character care? Do I, as a player, care enough to spend 20 of my 100 points to get all the characters? But really, all we really need is my ally. That's all we said we were going to do. What kind of character am I? And is this something I care enough about to spend the 20 points over the 5 points, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Think about Dread. Dread is a diceless game. And the resource in Dread is, do you pull a block or not? A player and I and the GM and the player are having a conversation, and then the player asks to do something, and the GM stops them and says, that has enough difficulty or interest or delicious dread potential. You can't do that unless you pull from the tower. And of course, if the tower falls, the Jenga tower falls, your character dies. So you're basically asking the character, are you willing to risk your character's life for this action that you want to take, or do you go, I'm good, it's fine. The camp counselor can die, it's fine. I don't actually even care about him that much. And it's like, okay, well, we learned something about your character, we learned something about the story, and of course, the awesome thing about Dread is in the beginning when the tower is very, very stable, everybody, do you have vanilla or chocolate? Well, if you want chocolate ice cream, you're gonna have to pull a block, and they go, yeah, sure, I'll pull a block, but then 20 pulls later, when the tower is starting to get a little wobbly, suddenly they're like, I don't know if I want to spend that points. And the same thing you would probably find is true in a system like a resource stamina system, because the players would be like, oh yeah, fine, sure, spend the points. And now they're down their final 30, and they got to be very, very cautious with them. So yeah. The Morpheus scene, but it's high prep versus low prep, as in like you don't know which way he's going to go. I mean, that's true. I mean, a good campaign, right, should be able to go with the flow for either of those. Like, what would have happened if Neo had taken the other pill, right? Is the campaign over? Do you just say, well, pack it up? You chose wrongly. So I've played a lot of diceless games in my time. And it really comes down to what are you getting enjoyment out of? You know, there's, for some people, the enjoyment of an RPG is honestly kind of tied to the gambling aspect, and the idea that you randomly you'll randomly find out whether you succeeded or you failed. And the best part about it is, in most traditional D20 RPGs, success doesn't cost you anything, right? Making a skill check, making an attack roll doesn't cost your character anything. And so if you get a success and you get what you want out of the game and it costs you nothing, it feels great, right? It feels like going to Vegas, putting, $10 down and winning. You're like, I didn't have to spend any money, I didn't have to spend any time, and I got everything I wanted. Yay! That's a great feeling to have. Why people like going to Las Vegas. Well, I like going to Las Vegas. So for some people, it's that sweat. It's that, that is what makes the game compelling and fun. So that if that is you, then yes, absolutely. It could suck a lot of the energy out of the game. I'm thinking of using 5th edition hit dice in place of stress to let characters have flashbacks. There's one main thing I don't like about that, Beowulf, which is hit dice are also used for your hit points, and they're also tied to level. So the idea is that like a level 1 character can flashback once, but a level 10 character could flashback 10 times. And hit dice vary differently because some characters have a bigger hit dice than other hit dice. I don't know that I love that. Yeah, I don't know that I love that solution, to be honest with you. I don't know what the solution is, but I don't know that I love that one. I mean, it's nice trying to use the hit dice mechanic as a resource. I just feel like the hit dice mechanic in 5th edition is really bad. Like recoveries from 13th Age, healing surges from 4th edition. These are like even the stamina resolve system from Pathfinder 2nd edition. These are way better than 5th edition's hit dice. I think the 5th edition hit dice system is terrible. I don't think it's interesting. I don't think it's particularly compelling. I don't think it's great. I don't know if they're going to change, but probably nothing. All right. Well, we're past 9:00 here, and it seems like everybody has kind of said what they needed to say. Again, thank you for joining me on this. It was a last-minute stream. We kind of threw it together. I know we kind of talked all over the place about different ideas. Hopefully, you came away with something interesting or useful. But again, I want to reiterate, when you're thinking about how to manage a campaign, I really want you to focus not just on the game, but on the players. And, when you think about the players, think about not only the logistics, the out-of-game stuff, the schedules, the food, and can somebody get a ride, but also think about what those players expecting out of your game. That means having a good session 0, but it also means understanding how their needs and wants changes throughout the course of the campaign. Because if you know what the players are expecting, or what the players like and what the players dislike, that'll make every other aspect of the game management, of the campaign management, much, much easier. So that would be sort of my main takeaway. Well, thank you, Lex. I'm glad you had a great time, and I hope hope everything goes really well for you. So, that we'll all be rooting for you. Come back and let us know how it went. Again, we're live every Tuesdays and Thursdays, most every Tuesdays and Thursdays, almost all of them, and sometimes Sundays. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell, because if we go live and you miss it because you didn't ring the bell, that's not my fault. That's YouTube's fault. And of course, if you're a member of the Knights of Last Call Patreon, you get a notification and a ping. So that way everybody can view all the videos that they want to see. Thank you, Ken, for the kind words. You're adding fate aspects to D&D. That I'm more okay with. Like, you could just add fate aspects to D&D and use fate points to gain advantage, or compel somebody and make them roll with disadvantage and give them a fate point. That would work. Hey, Kyle.
Kyle tipped $20. Thanks for putting together the streams last week. Every topic was fascinating.
Kyle, thank you for hitting our tip goal of I had nothing ready. Thank you so much for that very generous tip, and thank you for the kind words. I mean, last week was a lot of work, and I think we did. I streamed on Christmas Day, and I think we ended up streaming close to 15 hours last week. So, the community and people like you interacting is why I'm able to keep doing this, because you all ask great questions. You all have great responses and great feedback. You say really interesting things that get me inspired and take me down, interesting ideas or tangents sometimes that maybe we weren't originally expecting to go down. So that's what really makes it fun. Is I love that our streams are small enough, usually under 100 people, that I can follow along with you all here in chat, and we can have real conversations. And of course, these are brief and limited, but that is what the Knights of Last Call Patreon is for. That's what our Discord is for. It's so that we can have these really lengthy conversations that can extend for days or even weeks, it seems sometimes. So thank you so much for that, Kyle. You are awesome. You know what? You get strong here.
I am strong. Strong. Strong.
That's for Kyle becoming our new hype boss there right at the end of the stream. Thank you, Kyle. And thank you to everybody else who came in tonight and threw down their support. Chris came in, Rick, Ben, John, Save Versus, and Omniscitoad. So thank you so much, everybody, for putting together this nice little stream that we had here tonight. So, Ian, I have a party one-shot for 7 players. I haven't really run game before. I hope some people cancel. I have a rule, Ian, which is I don't want to run for more than 5 people, if we're being honest. For me, no matter what no matter how well intentioned you are, let's call it what it is. When you have 6 or 7 people, the session length is still 4 or 5 hours. That means that each person is getting 1/7 at most of the time. That's just not enough time for me. I need my players to be more engaged than that. So I'm right with you. I hope people do cancel. Tiger Eyes, it's always great to see you. And I'm glad you could join us here at the end as well. Frosty, good night. And I will see you later. Sweet Prince Frosty. Hey everybody, we're going to be back Thursday. I think we're going to be talking a little Blades in the Dark. And I think we're going to be talking a little bit about how to start Blades in the Dark campaigns. We might be talking a little bit about like GM moves as it relates to Blades in the Dark, like how to handle complications, consequences from dice rolls. There's been a lot of conversation in the Discord lately about how to get better at that, and I feel like I've failed because I have not done a good enough job of explaining it. So maybe we'll spend some time digging into that. And of course, you can take those ideas and take them to your D&D or Pathfinder game, and I think they would definitely help. So, all right, everybody, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace out, everybody.